say just a note for everyone, we are going to be recording this, and Christopher's been kind enough to take notes for us, so we'll share the raw notes on Discourse. And Christopher, I think there's also going to be a blog post that's happening.
Yes.
Awesome.
So we'll take these questions and we'll turn them into a blog post sometime tomorrow.
Awesome. And it looks like we have Patrick Atwater as well. Patrick, if you want to just like type in notes into the chat, please feel free to do so, and we'll answer questions as we can handle that. I think in terms of questions, maybe just a quick point of order. Christopher, do you want to intake questions via the chat, via the document, another way?
Let's do it via the document. So let me put the link to the chat in the notes.
Cool. Awesome. Wonderful. So yeah, for everyone, just a note, in the chat, Christopher has posted the link to the doc where if you can, please just add your questions. And then Christopher, if you don't mind sort of moderating for Jason and I just to kind of intake whatever questions don't get answers. And then maybe afterwards, Jason, if there's anything we missed, we can go in and just add ourselves, and perhaps we can share this with other NAC members so that they can also include their input for everyone who couldn't make it here tonight.
Sounds like a plan. Y'all ready to get started?
Cool, yeah. Do we want to start with just some quick intros, and then Christopher, maybe start with the first question? I know time commitment is maybe very top of mind for everyone.
Sure. Do we want everybody to introduce themselves, or just you, me, Jason?
I was going to say at least just the panelists for who the people are that are answering questions, and a little bit more about our background.
Sure. So my name is Christopher Whitaker. I'm one of the brigade program managers for Code for America. We also have Tom Dooner, our technical evangelist, on the call, as well as Meredith, who is our senior director for the network. Don McDougall is the Northeast Regional NAC member. Jason Hibbets is an at-large member. And Veronica Young is our other brigade program manager that's also on the call. I believe we have a couple of NAC members on the call as well, including Chris Alfano and Janet from Ohio. So with that, the first question is about time commitment. The question is, how much time commitment on average in a month do both of you spend on NAC work? What amount of commitment would be needed to be effective in the role? We've gotten a lot of questions on this and concerns about this throughout the recruitment process. So we'd love to hear what y'all have to say about it.
Yeah, definitely. Jason, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say based on a little over 2 years on the NAC, it's probably averaged out to be about 5 to 10 hours a month. It really, it varies depending on kind of what's going on. A normal month, we have a monthly call. Right now it's Wednesday evenings, like it's the third Wednesday or something. And that's a 90-minute call. It takes maybe 15, 20 minutes to prep for that call, just to go over the notes and add some things. And then really the rest of it, that's kind of like, I think, the core commitment that we have. The rest of it is based on some of the work that we're doing through the NAC. So for example, I was doing a lot of work with brigade action teams. So depending on where I was with that process would determine how much time I would spend on it. We also do things with some of the events. So in months where we've got Brigade Congress, we're probably spending closer to that 10-hour time frame, like outside of the event preparing for that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything other specifics around that. I'll pass it over to you, Dawn.
Yeah, so just for a little bit more context on Jason and I's background, for those of you who may not have been around for a bit, both Jason and I have been captains of brigades. I was captain for Philly for 3 years and have been on the NAC for a year. Jason is one of the original OG NAC members. So as he mentioned, he's been doing it for 2 years. So I think it's always going to be a challenge with balancing the things that we love about this work and about, where our time goes. But I think that the good benefit is that the staff does a pretty good job of keeping our commitments manageable and self-serve. So it's really about how much time do you as an individual have. And as Jason mentioned, we do have the monthly meetings. That's really so that staff can kind of keep us abreast of what's going on. We can raise our hand to say, yeah, I definitely want to be involved with Brigade Congress content, please, or whatever else might be going on. And we share our advice. Outside of that, I think we try to do our best to be realistic about what we want to do and what our capacity is for doing those things. And while it, certainly is some time, I think I agree with Jason, about 5 to 10 hours depending on any given time. But I do also think it's super energizing. It's just like a whole nother level of, when you get energized by your brigade, it's the exact same thing where it just feels very worth it. And you get to be part of a really great group of people who care just as much as you do. And I think for me, that's usually the balancing force that really helps me feel like, okay, I'm not feeling like I have to do these things, but if I take them on, I feel very supported. And if they don't happen in that month, that is not the worst thing in the world. And so there's a lot of, I think, flexibility in terms of how do we commit to things and have sort of generosity in how we think about delivery on those things while still making sure that we're adding value to the network at large.
Yeah, I would just add too, it sounds like there's maybe, I might interpret a sub-question of like, how do you balance the time with your brigade? And I don't think that's like an either or question. I think a lot of even though the work we're doing for the NAC is for the entire network, I'm able to take what I'm learning from the NAC and apply it to my local brigade. The other piece there that helps me is that with Open Raleigh, we've got multiple captains. And so we're really good at communicating, hey, I've got a busy month this month. We'll need other people to step up, and then vice versa when other folks get busy. So having that support system in place is very beneficial to me from a time management perspective.
Yeah, the monthly calls are an hour and a half, and that's like the hard minimum. I think for me, it's definitely been very beneficial that I'm not part of the day-to-day management of the local brigade anymore. But like Jason mentioned, I've been able to find things to work on the national level that align with what I want to work on the local level, and kind of made it part of one big effort.
I'm Janet Michaelis, and I'm co-captain of Code for Dayton, and I've been co-captain for about 4 years now. So I'm in the role of a regional NAC rep, which this is the first year for that role. And so I probably spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what that should be. And so I would say at least a couple hours a week, even though that isn't engagement time, but reading, writing. So it reminds me of like when you sign up to be a scout leader. And this is sort of this notorious, oh, it's only half an hour a week. But when you love doing something, you can let yourself get carried away with spending more time on it. So yeah, it's kind of what you make of it.
Meredith also asked a great question in the chat about why you got involved in NAC and what you love about it, which I think is a great question, and kind of builds on this as well, if we can go into that one. Jason, do you want to start with that one as well?
Since I'm OG, I'll go first. Yeah, I think really when the idea of the NAC was being proposed, I just saw a great opportunity to help get it established. And really, I wanted to bring a lot of my experience from open source communities to the Brigade network, and I thought this was just one way I could do it. Even though it was only supposed to be, I guess, a 1 year commitment, and then I ran again. It's going to end up 2.5 years, but it's like dog years. It feels like it's just kind of going by really fast. But just to reiterate, like it is very energizing, and then for me, we get to work with some amazing people, and so that's really what it's all about. We've got a great team, and I just wanted to kind of, this was a way that I could see giving back to the Brigade network from a lot of the experience we've had from the beginning. So Dawn?
Yeah. So I wasn't an OG, but was part of some of those conversations of like, how do we better serve the brigade and the brigade network kind of at large early on. And part of sort of, I think I sort of inherited a lot of Chris's kind of OG status in some ways for Philly because we were part of that first cohort of brigades that was really doing a lot of stuff and trying out a bunch of stuff. And I think having the opportunity to really get to lead at the local level was awesome and really, really neat to see that. And I think I was attracted to it because attracted to serving on NAC because I felt like what had been missing for me was the national connection. Even though I would go to Summit every year and had gone to Brigade Congress, it felt like for me, the Slack just wasn't the only way that I felt great about engaging with the broader network. And so after having gained a lot of knowledge, I really wanted to give that back to brigades who had been, who were starting up. I had, talked to a bunch of different brigades and try to help to mentor them in the early days, but I wanted to have more influence over the structural way that the network was evolving, especially at such a formative time. It's really quite still formative. And so I think that was my attraction. And then very similar to what Jason is saying is like being able to get to talk to brigade captains, like it completely like renews your whole look on this. I think we all talk a lot about sustainability and it's really easy to feel sort of isolated and maybe like you're the only person doing this work at this level, maybe if you're not really getting engaged with other folks. But to be able to see just how many people are doing this work and carrying this mission at such of a tenacity that they are, is just really humbling. And I think that's something that I love about it. I love getting to talk to other captains. I love getting to help do things that make their life easier and make it so that they can keep doing the work that they need to be doing. So for me, it feels a little bit like a graduation after handing the reins over for being a captain. It definitely felt like a way to stay involved in the organization and get to share a lot of what we've learned and try to help, shape it to be better for the future.
Yeah, for me, every year, Summit has always been my favorite time when I get to feel like I'm with my people and with people that understand me, and later with Brigade Congress. So being on the NAC for me has really been a way to let me get a lot more of that and feel a lot more connected to folks, not just in my own brigade, but across the country.
Well, being from a smaller city and a really small brigade, I saw the NAC as an opportunity to try to help figure out how to integrate the people who aren't in big cities and aren't in large tech communities, and to leverage that passion and skill wherever they happen to be. And so that is a huge challenge, and I want to be a part of trying to figure that out.
Do we have any other NAC members on the call that I might have missed? Nope. Okay. So the next question is, what were some problems NAC attempted to solve for the network that was more challenging than it first appeared?
I think this is also sort of related to a question that just got asked in the chat as well. What does NAC stand for? What is the mission, and what problems have been tackled over the last 2 years? I totally want to put the OGs on the spot because I feel like you guys have so much stuff that you kind of have learned even from that first year. Jason, Chris, do you guys want to take a first stab at that?
Sure. I would say, yeah, definitely my participation in the National Advisory Council, aka NAC, is kind of a tale of two halves. I think the first year was really just trying to figure out what the NAC could do and what the right relationship was with Code for America. We spent a lot of, I'd say probably the first 6 to 8 months just doing some discovery and some listening. I remember we did some brigade interviews. I got a chance, and a lot of us did, to interview about 10-ish brigades and asked us just kind of understand where they're at and get an understanding of what the need of the network was. At the time, we were hearing a lot of stuff about burnout and leadership development and things of that nature. So those listening sessions really helped set us up for the second year of the NAC to start really doing the work to support the network and making sure that the work we're doing was going to be effective. We also spent some time doing some, I don't want to say like mission statement, but like value statement type stuff, where we brought in a facilitator. They helped walk us through a little bit of that process. We actually we had two-hour video calls like right before the holidays, and we were all just really motivated to participate in that because we wanted to really hit the beginning of the year running and get a good understanding of our value statements and what we could do. Chris, what did I miss?
In addition to everything you said, I think over the last 2 years, along with the NAC, we've seen Code for America really make a big investment in the network staff and building out a network team. And a big part of our role has been always being at arm's length for them when they have questions or want to roll something out or get thoughts and get things out to the network. I think I've really enjoyed getting to play that role and getting to know the network team.
To address some of the challenges too, I think one of them is like we wanted to make sure that we were representative of the community. And so we were really just trying to understand like, hey, we're making decisions for like a couple hundred people. And we wanted to make sure that we were doing our due diligence and making sure that we just had a couple of processes in place where, if something's coming from the NAC, that it has, at least had the attention of multiple NAC members and, had some sort of consensus. And then we're still trying to figure it out, but communications has always been a challenge, and this is really just around how much do we communicate about the NAC and what we're doing and what we're working on, so that when we do communicate, it's effective, but also maintaining that balance of transparency, so that if someone wants to go deeper and understand some of the decisions behind the decisions, they could, if that was warranted, and we're all volunteers in this effort, so making sure that we've got the right level of information coming out is something we're still working on.
Yeah, just to tie that back to the earlier question about what's been a challenge that we might have underestimated or it was harder than we thought it was going to be. I think one thing that continues to be really evasive is communication. It's actually surprisingly, not surprisingly, actually pretty difficult to have streamlined communications for a 50,000 person community. Like there are, I think 50,000 people or something of that magnitude of people who are within like the membership and maybe even more people who don't belong to Meetup and identify with the ideals. And so to try to have something that is collaborative and something that is transparent and something where we get a lot of feedback from the network, and then also have sort of an anchoring force of what Code for America is really taking on is a hard tension to make sure is a healthy tension, a healthy balance, and make sure that we find a middle ground that works for everybody. And that is just a long process. It takes a lot of time to make sure that we're hitting the right channels, that we're communicating with people in the way that they want to be communicated with. Some brigades just go quiet after a while because they're really focused on local and they're not ready to be part of national conversations. So I think we're continuing to build on the infrastructure that the first year of NAC built, and we're continuing to build on that by continuing to do more listening tours, more touch points with brigade members. We're going to be doing some travel to various brigades over this year to make sure that we're really creating those relationships and making sure that we really understand from all the different angles what's happening, so that when we do decide to create infrastructure, it's flexible enough to kind of endure changes that are inevitably going to happen, but stable enough so that we don't keep reinventing the wheel, because I think that is often very common when people don't have the information they need. We end up rehashing the same problems and approaching it in the same way. So I think we're just trying to get better at that scale and that structure, as well as, overall creating sustainability for a volunteer-driven organization.
And I can add a little bit about sort of the history about why NAC was created. When the brigade program started, it was 13 people in 9 cities. And it was fairly easy for staff to communicate with 13 people in 9 cities. Then we grew to like 20, and it became a little bit of you could still do it, but it was a little harder. When we got to about 40 brigades, it became really unwieldy. And because of that unwieldiness, we didn't have any way to really understand the needs of the entire network and be able to respond sort of as a community. So we created NAC as a 9-person council. Initially, the first NAC was all at-large. Now we have both at-large seats and regionals. That way the regional seats are responsible for communication within all the brigades in their region. And that's been a tremendous help in getting feedback from multiple points of view within the brigade, being able to sort of share the load between understanding what the community needs, because it's easier as staff to communicate with NAC and then have NAC venture out than it is to try to talk to all 78 of you at once, which is not really possible anymore. We're really, really big, guys and gals.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of that, just to add a little bit more color to that, is I think what Code for America has done well is saying, hey, we want people from the community helping to lead some of what's happening, right? So like most of NAC has been a brigade captain or is still a brigade captain. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't been a brigade captain at this point, as far as I know. But I think having people from the community to represent the community is super important.
Yeah, Christopher, I remember when we could all fit on one Google Hangout, and then we outgrew that really quickly. So those were the days. The other, I think, is maybe helpful to mention just a couple of things that the NAC has accomplished. And in the vein of the kind of challenges, we did get the voting framework out the first year because we realized that, well, according to the way it's set up, we're going to have another vote every year. I'd say that wasn't necessarily difficult. I would say the challenge in that was it was just a time constraint. And I think we've definitely learned from that, that we have to build in a little bit more time in order to get the right amount of feedback and in order to do the pilots that we need to do, in order to make sure that we're kind of taking a crawl, walk, run approach to stuff that we're deploying to the network. And then I think from the communication standpoint that I mentioned earlier, the discourse has been wildly successful. That just started off as an experiment of like, hey, is this even going to work? Are people going to use it? And now we've got people adding all sorts of knowledge and things that are helpful to the entire network. So kudos to Chris for helping us get that up and running quickly, and then making sure we had at least some minimal infrastructure in place for people to start playing around with it. And now it's a great resource for us.
Cool. So the next question we have is, let's see, how much travel and how often is it expected of NAC members?
Great question. Probably the only explicit travel would be to Summit and Brigade Congress. And what we will be rolling out for March is a new sort of, I've been calling it the peaceful transition of power, which is having outgoing NAC members meet with incoming NAC members, basically to make sure that we don't just have a cold bath in terms of people kind of leaving and all of a sudden you're like, hi, I'm in NAC. So we'd like to have some transition. We'll be doing some revisiting of some of the questions that are super important, which would be around what are we doing and some strategic planning and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of the travel, I think that those are really the three main ones. All of that being said, I think that there's still a lot that's getting nailed down. Christopher, I don't know if you have any finer points to put on that, but I think that those are probably the most valuable times where we could have NAC members present. But if people can't travel 3 times a year or twice a year, I think there's definitely flexibility there to understand. Again, this is completely volunteer. So I think the bigger thing is just making sure that your presence is somewhere at NAC. Maybe it's just one of those two instead of both of those.
And to be clear,
go ahead, Christopher.
I was just going to say, and all the travel, all NAC travel is paid for. That's a separate budget than some of the travel support requests. So if you're, for example, Code for Philly with Dawn and Chris both on NAC, their travel does not cut into Code for Philly's travel requests. So that is bonus points for you in terms of getting people to your brigade because all your NAC travel is paid for.
Yeah, and then I think, Meredith, you had some comments maybe about some of the new travel that is very optional.
Correct. Yes, we'll emphasize very optional, but for those who are excited and interested and eager to travel to different brigades across the country to help do some knowledge sharing and development of smaller brigades or help us beef up the network, we'd absolutely love to have you and work with you to travel to other places. Dawn might be able to talk about an upcoming opportunity that she's
I was going to say, do we mention that I get to go to Paris for a conference to represent Code for America? Totally terrible travel requirements, you know? No, it's very exciting. It's very cool to get to go to a civic tech conference and speak about what we do. And it's just awesome location this time around. Myself and another NAC member are going to Paris in a few weeks to represent. But very optional.
So I would add, in addition to some travel to brigades, also representing Code for America at conferences and representing the movement writ large to help us grow and strengthen the movement, I think is really critical and something that we want to support. So if that is something that you as a NAC member are excited about, we're eager to work with you on that.
Other NAC members want to chime in before we move on? Okay. Next question is, what are the roles and expectations of NAC?
Sorry, in terms of roles and expectations, is that coming from, in terms of what we set for ourselves or from Code for America?
Let's do both.
Cool. Actually, I'm sorry, I've been having a lot of airtime. Jason, why don't you take the mic for a minute?
Sure. Well, I guess like expectations, we kind of talked about these, but I'll kind of wrap it up here. I'll wrap them together. You've got the monthly meeting, which is 90 minutes. That's virtual. You've got the 3 travel pieces. That's Summit, Brigade Congress, and then the transition. And then really just kind of the pieces of the NAC that you want, that you're passionate about, that you want to work on. I'm very interested in the brigade action teams and how we work collaboratively across space, across brigades. And then other people just step up for various things. And I would just mention that the brigade team is super helpful in just making sure that from a communication standpoint, things are going out. If we need help organizing a meeting, they're there to help us out too. So there's some great supportive roles from the Code for America team.
My own strategy has been to find initiatives that I'm really passionate about, where there's both a local lens and a national lens. I think Jason mentioned something about that too. And for me, that's been network infrastructure like Discourse and Civic Cloud and hosting stuff.
I see one of our roles to be as an intermediary, sort of an interpreter of having been around longer. Especially, we have a number of new brigades coming on board in our region, and to help sort of interpret for them and also advocate for their needs.
Any other member of NAC want to chime in? All right. The next question is, and I'll just answer this for clarity, how many members per region and at large currently and open for election? So the elections alternate year to year. So this year we're voting on 5 at-large positions. Next year the regional seats will be up for election, and there are 4 regional seats. So the next question is, what are some specific individual brigade needs that lean on NAC for support and guidance?
These are such great questions. Janet, let's mix it up. Do you want to take a first draft at this?
Well, I don't feel like I've really been very leaned on. Fielding questions, really, and has been the main thing.
I think where this really shines is through Brigade Congress in preparing the content, because we want to make that in time, the precious in time person that we have together, as valuable as possible. And so trying to get an understanding of what type of leadership development people are interested in, making sure we can bring in facilitators to match that need, and then also just balancing out some of the amazing things that are happening in brigades and giving them some airtime to highlight successes and challenges and so forth. So I think with Brigade Congress, we have a really good balance of training, success stories, and then just learning from each other with the unconference portion. I see Dawn shaking her head. So what else would I miss on that one?
Oh, nope. I think that's all great. I was going to add, I think in particular for being a regional rep, I feel like I get a lot of conversations around how can I be helpful. So I sort of cheat with Code for Philly, obviously, having a lot of contact with those folks. But even for other folks in my region who are not, who I don't have so much direct contact with, I decided to offer setting up regular check-ins with them. Some folks we almost never check in. That's totally cool. Some people we check in every other week, and that's also totally cool. And in those conversations, we'll talk about, hey, how do I partner with a local government? How do I secure space? What resources does Code for America already have figured out? Myself and Jerry, who's the captain for Code for Hackensack, chatted, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to give this presentation. Do you have any materials for what do we do? And I was like, yes, I'm sure we have a template for what we do at Code for America Network. So I think, sometimes it feels very small in terms of even just being able to provide something like a template, but having, I remember when I was taking on being captain, and it can be a super lonely job, especially if you're one of a very small group of leaders. And so I think just knowing that you have some support, helping to create introductions. So the captain for Code for Hackensack and the captain for Code for Jersey City, being able to help forge those connections, I think is super invaluable. And that's something that, we want to scale and sort of streamline in terms of how we do that. But for now, having NAC help to support in just providing our kind of the insights and lessons that we learned maybe the hard way, and also helping to be a direct connection to Code for America to say, hey, you guys have MOUs going out. You asked us to review these. Here's some of the feedback I'm hearing from the brigade. So to Janet's point, there's a lot of advocacy that's happening. But I do also think just whatever kind of comes up with organizing, we're organizers. And so it's really helpful to have somebody who you can just sort of ping and know, hey, you're going to be able to help me with these questions that I'm coming up against. And just to know, they're not crazy, like they're normal, and a lot of brigades hit these. So just being able to have a facilitator help tap into that greater collective knowledge, I think is really, really helpful. And there's, I'm sure, a bunch of different individual brigade needs that happen, but there's a lot of patterns that we've been seeing as well.
She's not here, but I'll give her a shout out. Laura from Code for Durham, who represents the South region, has done a great job of identifying some common things that she's hearing from brigade leaders, folks in her region, and then creating little committees to problem solve on that topic. So for example, she's organized, maybe you all have been a part of these, designers to sort of scheme on different design challenges and needs and create a space for folks in that space who sort of represent a bunch of different brigades. We're doing the same thing on membership. So folks who want to talk about membership, retention, recruitment, how do we engage folks? How do we capture information? How do we communicate in a way that folks can and want to receive? That'll be on Thursday. So that's an example of sort of identifying some of the common needs that have come up, whether it's through individual check-in calls or things that came up at Brigade Congress, Brigade Day at Summit, and then trying to work with folks within the network to help solve some of those.
Mayor, that also reminds me too that I hosted one the first year, but then we didn't have regions defined. I hosted a South region, just kind of a video conference where, and Laura did one a couple weeks ago for the defined South region, where we just got together on a call for like an hour and just shared information and just introduced each other and kind of did a little bit of knowledge sharing. And that was very valuable because people are able just to make connections, whether that's a common project or a common challenge that they're facing. So I'm hoping that other regions are doing that as well. That was just very helpful.
Yeah, we did a virtual happy hour for the Northeast Brigades, and that was just a great way to sort of build connections that isn't necessarily productive time, but just like, hey, what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about? And a lot of it was brigade related, but I also think just having connections for some of those crossovers between personal and professional life, especially for folks who work in government and are brigade members. Laura is one of those folks who's like in the brigade and works for government, and that's really, really awesome. So I think just hearing what people are up to, there's a ton of value in just having that visibility that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Any other NAC members want to jump in? So the next question is this a good role for a new member?
I think that's a new member to any sort of code for?
I believe so.
Good question. Jason, what do you think?
Well, it could go either way. They could bring, that person could bring a fresh perspective on like, what the NAC could do, what they could be working on. I would just say the challenge with that might be just maybe not having enough of the history of what we've been working on and what the network does. I think that's a very minor challenge that could be overcome really quickly, particularly with our transition session that we're going to have this time. I think that's going to be really helpful. I think Dawn is like you were onboarding. It was like, welcome to the NAC. We're going to meet next Tuesday. Let's go. So I think that will be really helpful in overcoming that piece of the challenge. But yeah, I think it's really if this is something you're passionate about, it's just going to be a great advisory board to participate in.
Yeah, I think I have a similar sentiment. It sort of, for me, depends on, is this your way to get to know what this work is? Because it does require a lot of passion to, I think, carry you through some of the challenges of this work that I think most folks who have been in a brigade for some amount of time and who have served on the organizing team, even if you weren't the brigade captain, but you have helped serve in some capacity, I think it just is familiar. So you have sort of that advantage. And I think that you definitely, as long as you're passionate about the mission, I think that's really the biggest piece that's going to help make you an effective NAC member. And I don't know if there's any like limitations that Christopher, you want to speak to. I assume not, but I do think that just really having that sort of hunger and passion and drive to improve what we're doing and carry that mission forward, that's really the most important part to me.
Officially, there is no, as long as you're a member of a brigade that has a signed MOU, there's no like residency requirement, for lack of a better word.
Chris, do you have thoughts on that as someone who's one of the first NAC members?
I'll go. Chris,
paying
I don't know
attention.
where Chris went.
Jim,
Yeah, I don't know that having seniority is necessarily an advantage because we are constantly iterating and on a constant learning loop. So I think you can kind of jump on this at any point and contribute. Yeah, I don't think it matters.
Christopher, I would just say it looks like we've still got some questions coming in, so maybe we could try to speed, or not that, I want to try to get to all of them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. I do want to get to Ryan's question because this is a really good one. Ryan asks, you keep referring to having been a captain. What if you currently are one? Do you think it's manageable to do both at the same time?
awesome question, by the way. I think totally. I think a lot of our NAC members are currently captains. I actually think myself and Chris Alfano are in the minority by being previously captains. So maybe Janet and Jason, you want to talk about how manageable you feel like it is?
Yeah, I find it manageable. Again, the thing that helps me on the brigade side, local brigade side, is we've got multiple captains, so we're able to kind of share the workload. I would say if you're like a single captain, You might want to recruit some people to help you. It also too just really depends on how your time management skills are. I mean, I've got a full-time job, 2 kids, and brigade work and NAC work and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm involved with a lot of different things, and so I'm able to divvy up my time appropriately to work on what the current priority is.
Yeah, I'm a current captain as well, but I have a co-captain. I'm just tend to get overextended, so I think it depends on how well you can manage your shifting priorities and how much support you have from your brigade members on things that are going on there, which isn't something you can know ahead of time. So I think that it's worth trying if it appeals to you. You can figure it out with the rest of us.
Janet also is an ER nurse, and she's very humble, so I don't know if she'd share that herself, but has some superhuman skills when it comes to giving people her time and energy.
Yeah, I think Jill's also currently a captain. Laura's also currently a captain. Emma's also currently a captain. I think Nina's also currently a captain. I think it's maybe just myself and Chris out of the 9 people who are on the NAC.
So the next question is, thoughts on the balance of representation of smaller brigades, like 3 to 10 members, versus larger ones on NAC. As a NAC, how do you ensure that all the voices are heard? And I'll skip to Janet on this one, because I know that you have thoughts on this too.
Yes, you just make sure you have some people on the NAC that are on brigades like that and that are outspoken and say, yeah, we don't have that problem of not having enough projects for people. We have the problem of not having enough people for the projects. So, and I think we have a pretty good balance right now, but we need to be conscious of that moving forward. Hey, Isaac, I think my dog's trying to get up here to see your dog, but what do you want?
Yeah, I feel on each NAC, we've had representation from smaller brigades. We had Andrew from, I think it was Orlando, on the first round of NAC, and we've got Janet here. So I think it's just, if we get into a situation where we don't have that representation, I think it's just up to the NAC to make sure we've got our diligent in our outreach to get an understanding from brigades of that demographic.
We also have Emma.
Yeah, Maine. Yep.
So if you're from a small brigade and thinking about it, you should go ahead and run. Okay. So next question is, what challenges have you faced as a NAC member that made the role difficult or made you question the decision to serve on NAC?
Gosh, everyone with the good questions. So good.
I've actually I cannot recall a time when I second guessed putting my hat in the ring. The work that we do is so energizing, and the people that we get to work with are just amazing. So it's just I'm never like, oh God, I've got to join the NAC call. It's more like, hey, I've got to make time to get, I've got to make sure I've got the NAC call set up and I'm ready for it, because I don't want to show up unprepared and look like I haven't done my fair share. So yeah, it's been a great 2.5 years. I'm actually a little disappointed that I can't serve on the NAC, but I'm definitely going to find other ways that I can still contribute, just not on that piece of it.
You did term limits to yourself.
It's like we voted ourselves off the island.
You did. I actually questioned it when I got elected. I was like, oh wait, now I have the chance, just in case I really don't want to do this, to back out. Because I mean, it's totally intimidating. It's totally intimidating to feel like, oh, you are going to have to do all of this. but to Jason's point, I mean, I think it's like any time that you work with a great team, when you feel really supported, it just makes it possible to be able to take it on. I think there are definitely times where I feel like I wish I did more. I feel like for me at least, I wish I was more utilized and made sure that I was investing more and doing more. I think it ultimately chalks up to like, oh gosh, am I gonna whip by these 2 years and then be up for re-election or not run, and then I won't have kind of done all the things I wanted to do. So I think I more have scarcity mindset around that kind of feeling of like, oh, I hope I do enough. But I think that all of my fear, for me at least, was in the beginning before I joined NAC, and then joining it was just awesome because it's just a really great team. And the Code for America side, I think, is really receptive to our feedback, and we have a lot of autonomy to figure out kind of how we want to operate. So I think that makes it all really, really doable. But yeah, for me, like my greatest fear with this is like failing the community.
I was shocked when I was elected, and I was thinking I have a very different background from the rest of these people, and I am from a completely different generation from the rest of these people. And then I realized maybe that was the point of me being there, was being different. So it has been a wonderful experience so far. It was still a challenge to kind of figure out how we bring in different kinds of diversity and where our commonalities lie and how we can build on that. So I don't regret it. I have another year to figure it out, and I feel really honored to be a part of this.
The other piece of this too that I was just thinking about, I'm trying to remember on during our NAC calls, whenever there's something that comes up that says, hey, will someone do this, right? It's some task or something. And I think Meredith has been the beneficiary of this over the last few weeks. Someone on the NAC always steps up to lead something. And so I think it's one part we're all passionate about something, but we're all, we all know that, hey, we're a team and we got to get this stuff done. And someone has always said, yes, I'll do that. And then 9 times out of 10, there's at least 1 or 2 other members that are willing to support that same effort.
And it feels awesome that if you don't do it, it's like, oh, Jason's going to do it, so it's going to be awesome at the end of this. Or Janet's going to do this, so it's going to be like killer. And Jason's going to lead this meeting. It's going to be well facilitated. It's like you can just be like, I don't have to worry about that because this other person's going to do a great job of it.
So the next question is, what are the current demographics on the NAC? I will try to do some quick math real quick, but in the meantime, we do want to have a diverse group of people leading the NAC. So I'd love it if a couple of NAC members could talk to that aspect while I try to do math.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I feel like I keep taking up all of the oxygen. So Janet and Jason, please jump in where you see fit. So in terms of diversity, I mean, I think this has been a topic of conversation since the beginning. I think that we, as a whole network, are like vocalizing that we need this within our brigades, not just NAC, right? It's about our brigades. And there's been a lot of attention on how do we do a better job of attracting and retaining people who represent the people who we want this technology to serve. So I think that the current NAC, I think, is representative of the demographics of the network that has been around for a while now. And I think that the good news is that there's a lot of attention on how do we do better at this, because we know that it's an area where we want and need to be better, not just in terms of the NAC, but the entire community is vocalizing that. And I think creating things like trainings, being really specific about outreach, trying to I think it all starts with a conversation about, where are we falling short? What is creating some of these challenges and these pain points? So I think that that's something that has been really encouraging. I know from my perspective, if if there's ever a group that should be partially responsible for this, civic technology is. We are here to serve, the broader public, and that is, that needs to be a much more inclusive space. And so I think it's encouraging to see that there's more efforts, but obviously there's much more that we can continue to be doing. But I will say for us, it's been a pretty good topic of discussion for ourselves, programming, what can we do for, Brigade Congress Summit, and we have to be respectful and careful about, how we approach that topic so that it's not coming off as sort of counterproductive, because I think there's definitely attempts that do that. But I will say that has been super important and top of mind for everyone who's participating in NAC and a lot of our brigade leaders.
Yeah, Dawn, the only thing I would add is I think the successful efforts around more diversity is just being intentional about it. And I think Code for America does a great job because our code of conduct sets the tone for that, about creating a welcoming environment for everyone who wants to participate. And I think we're intentional. We talk about it during our meetings, and we look for ways to be more inclusive and to invite everyone to the table.
And for the actual numbers, right now, the current demographics of NAC are 7 women, 2 men, 2 people of color, and then 2 members of the NAC are white males. For bonus points, the network team has 3 men, 2 women, 2 people of color, and 3 white. We did have one more question. And I think it's the last one I have written down in the doc or in the chat, asking how do you define which members are allowed to vote? On the staff side, we'll look at meetup data to determine that. There were some cases last year in which we had a vote come in that we didn't see at meetup, that we reached out to the captain. Sometimes they just weren't beat up. We just check the box and everything's fine. But that's how we look at whose membership is. They'll need to be in meetup. And then we'll make accommodations for brigades that aren't in meetup.
For Open Rally Brigade, since we share a meetup page with a couple other brigades, we define members as someone we have their email address that's that we believe is that we would define as active, has participated in some fashion in the last few weeks or months. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's how we made our decision on our side.
And to clarify, it's attended in the past year.
And Christopher and Dawn and Janet and Chris, we totally forgot at the beginning to say thank you everyone for joining, unless I joined a little bit late and you did that. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your interest in the National Advisory Council. And if you have any other questions, Dawn, myself, and others are available if you just want to sync up offline. Maybe there's something we didn't get to, or hopefully we covered most of the things. But we really appreciate your time this evening and appreciate your interest in this. It is, as I said, been an amazing experience for me. I didn't do this just to add something to my resume. I've got plenty of things on my resume. This was really about helping establish the National Advisory Council, getting it going, and setting it up for success. And I feel like I've accomplished most of that.
And thank you all. Thank you to our current NAC, who has just done an incredible and invaluable, my dog's squeaking in the background, job to help, I think, stabilize and strengthen the network. So just so appreciate your time and energy.
So we just about run out of time. I know there's a couple of questions about sort of more general election process. If you will email me, or if you will email brigadeinfo@codeforamerica.org with any of those type questions, we will answer those, and I'll put them in the blog post sort of announcing the candidates. When we announce candidates, we'll also explain how voting works, and we'll cover some more of the process in that post. As a reminder, election The deadline to file for the NAC election is Thursday, the 31st. So if you haven't put in an application yet and you want to run, please do so as soon as possible, because part of the ballot is we ask you questions about why you want to run for NAC, what your goals are, and we use that to put up a blog post that sort of answers all those questions so that the brigade membership can see your answers and decide who to vote for. We do have a discourse channel if you want to share any of your questions publicly. We'll also feel free to ask any additional questions or continue to talk about the election in the brigade Slack channel or Discord, and we will get to the questions as they come in.
Yay, thank you. Run for NAC.
Run for NAC.
Thanks everybody so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good evening.
And everyone.